Hello. Okay, so
Hi.
today is a super special episode. Amy and I are having a conversation about recurrence. So welcome.
Thanks. I'm glad to chat with you about this. It's an issue that a lot of women struggle with. So let's dive in.
Absolutely. And you know what? It really is. We're talking about from the perspective of mindset, about the mindset around recurrence and how we can get some relief from that. And then pulling in your expertise of how do we avoid it? What can we do to prepare ourselves? And so really just an all over, really inclusive episode, which I'm really thrilled about.
Yeah.
So let's start first, Amy, with you and what you do and where you come from and everything like that.
Yeah. So I am personally a cancer survivor. I was diagnosed stage 3 ovarian cancer in 2016. And at the time that I was diagnosed, I was actually already working in cancer care. So it's a bit ironic, I think when you work in cancer care, all you see is cancer all day long. So we're all a little bit of hypochondriacs in some kind of sense, thinking everything's cancer. But it had never crossed my mind. I had no family history. I have many sisters. There's no sign of cancer really in our family. And then I started getting these really subtle but nagging symptoms. My number one symptom was truly heartburn. That was the number one symptom I had, just because I had a large tumor growing within my abdomen, which caused pressure on my digestive system and acid reflux. And so, my background really is helping women during cancer treatment. And so that's where I went into my treatment with. I knew a ton about cancer care, about chemo, about radiation, about the drugs around it. I had finished my doctorate, University of Toronto, in the same area. And then I was diagnosed myself. So once I had gone through treatment and the long recovery, I realized that there's actually like a lot of support for women during cancer treatment. There's a lot of support there, but there's no support in cancer recovery. Once you're done with your treatment, you're kind of just pushed out of the nest. And yeah, we hope for the best, fly, fly. And women really struggle. So I was seeing a lot of highly achieving, highly motivated women that weren't able to get back to that same state after cancer. And that's when I shifted my practice to focus in cancer recovery, and I started the Cancer Freedom Program.
Amazing. And I know it's been really instrumental in my life. I work in the program and I know how much change the ladies get in there. And it really has been extraordinary and really a big topic that really gets talked about is that prevention of recurrence. And I know you have some great tips and tricks within that and how we can really arm ourselves as survivors. So talk a little bit about some of those tips.
Yeah, so I really feel like there's a few key areas you have to focus on if you're really wanting to do everything you can to lower your risk of recurrence and to also be free of that fear of recurrence. Because if you're fearful that your cancer is going to come back, even if you're cancer free, like you're still a prisoner of cancer.
Yeah,
Like you are. And, if you feel that way, it's totally normal. Gosh, most women struggle with fear of recurrence, but there's some really strategic steps we can put into place so you start to feel confident knowing that you're doing everything you can to lower your risk and you can go ahead and live your life. So I really feel like the first thing that you need is you need a plan. Like you need a plan to lower your risk, just like you needed a plan for your treatment, right? Like
absolutely.
we're all given treatment plans that are so clear. It's like this many cycles of chemo, this many rounds of radiation, then surgery, then like it's a da da da. You need a plan to lower your risk of recurrence. Okay. So there are some big key things that we can put into place here to lower your risk. So this is evidence-backed. This is science-backed. When we look at the greater body of literature, we know that there's certain key things that will lower your risk. Okay. The first is targeted exercise. you can lower your risk of recurrence from cancer by about 59%. Okay. I know.
Mind-blowing. It's
Right.
unbelievable how, there's all these drugs out there and they are effective, but nowhere near as effective as exercise. Such a simple thing.
And I share this, right? Like, because this is not like a little piece of literature anymore. Like this is not like from a mouse study and we made mice run and they were less like, no, that's not what happened here. It was actually tens of thousands of women have been studied over the course of longer than a decade. Like even over the span of my career, I've been working in cancer care for 13 years. It's exploded. And we now have like the highest level of evidence, a systematic review, that says you can drop your risk of recurrence by 59%. Now, some women will say like, well, why? Like, why does that work? Why is it that way? There's a couple theories. Like the first is that it helps lower long-term inflammation in your body. So that could potentially lower your risk of cancer. And then the second thing is that there's hormonal impacts. And I'm not talking about estrogen in hormonal sense. I'm talking about more of like when we think about hormones around diabetes, right? Insulin sensitivities. If we can regulate that, then there's a theory that it's less likely that you're going to be experiencing a recurrence.
Wow. That's unbelievable. I know for myself, a huge part of my treatment plan in regards to both my medical team and my naturopathic team was as much oxygen as you can get into the tissues, the better, and so of course I'm not studied as an expert in this area, and it's precisely why I have you here. But I know that was really big during the treatment plan, was like, let's get oxygen into your body. And so, I mean, I love that everything that you're speaking about is lining up with these theories of like, how can we bring that inflammation down in our bodies and on all of these sorts of things. And just the simplicity of avoiding side effects. When you're exercising, your joints don't hurt as much. The hot flashes aren't as intense. Like there's so many reasons to exercise.
Look,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, if I were to tell you, like, you could take a pill every day and it's going to lower your risk of cancer recurrence by 59%. And yeah, all pills have side effects, but this one literally only has positive side effects. It's actually, by you taking this pill, it's actually going to make your family even healthier, because we know that mothers who exercise have children that are more likely to exercise as well. So gosh, like to me, I'm like, that's a no-brainer, right?
It is. I completely agree with you. Let's talk about what you mean by exercise. What are some of the ways that we can include exercise and have that statistic work in our favor?
Yeah. So a lot of women think, oh, like after cancer, they're just so beat up, they're tired. Right. And that was my number one side effect. I was exhausted. So now you're saying, oh, exercise, gee whiz, that sounds like a good idea in theory, but like, there's no way. Okay. And so when I talk about exercise, I am not talking about high intensity, dripping with sweat, running a marathon. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like low intensity exercise. I'm talking about walking. Like if you are like, if you're like, look, I'm tired, I can't get to the gym, don't go to the gym. You don't have to. Walk across your house, walk down the block. Like start with 5 minutes today. That's it. And build consistency over time.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I just got off the phone with a student and a client, and she was saying that she's looking at this mountain of exercise that she needs to get back into. And she has this feeling of like, I've had to struggle for so long. I don't want to struggle anymore. And so she's avoiding exercise. And we talked about just that. And wouldn't you agree that it doesn't need to be this mountain? It can be, like you said, walk across the house. It can be 5 minutes. And then next week it's 10 minutes. And the weekend after that, it's 15 minutes. And we can build that that strength back up. It doesn't have to be a mountain.
When we think about like lifting weights or strength training, we talk in terms of reps, right? You do 5 reps of something. And I lifted weights before I was diagnosed. And so when I lifted weights, I would always tell myself, it's just 1 rep at a time, right? It's not 12 reps of this. It's literally 1 rep. And then it's the next rep. And then it's the next rep. And so I carried that kind of mentality through chemo. It's not 6 cycles of chemo, it's 1, and then it's the next. And so it's the same with that. It's not like, oh man, I used to be able to run a half marathon and now I can't even walk down the block. No, it's like, it's 5-minute walk today. That's it. We're building it 1 rep at a time.
I completely agree. And so I hesitate to ask because I don't want to create the mountain, but what's the end goal? What would be the ideal, 5 minutes till what point?
Yeah. So when we look at cancer prevention guidelines, we have 2 big guidelines that guide us on the most science-backed strategies to lower your risk of cancer recurrence. And those guidelines are aiming for a minimum of 150 minutes of low intensity cardio per week. Okay. So that, I guess, is what you would use for your goal. Okay. But now this does not mean that until you hit 150 minutes per week, you're getting no benefit of risk reduction. Like, okay. So you're still getting benefit as you make your progress towards that goal. Now, if you're already hitting 150 minutes, like amazing, but we can push it more, right? There's new literature to show that up to 300 minutes would have even more benefit. So if you like being outside in the summer, or if you like running around or being with your kids or whatever that is, walking across Costco, hello, okay, then more is always better.
Okay. I didn't know about the 300 minutes. That's pretty cool. I mean, of course, it makes sense, right? More good, the more good.
Right. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, you bet. So that's kind of like the first thing, is that it's targeted exercise. That's really the first thing we have to dive into. Then the second thing that really makes a difference in terms of reducing your risk of recurrence is maintaining a healthy body weight. Okay. So we know that if you can maintain a healthy body weight, you're less likely to have that inflammation again, your body. It's the same theory around insulin sensitivity. And so we do want to strive for a healthy body weight. Okay. So this is a challenge. Like, I put on 20 pounds during my chemo treatment.
Yeah, 35.
What'd you find your path was like there, Christine?
Yeah, I gained 35 pounds through my process. And it was a little bit of a combination of everything. It was the steroids, it was the stress eating, it was the immobility, all of these sorts of things, and just general inflammation. Mm-hmm. But yeah, coming out of it, I felt like I was looking at a mountain, like, what do I do here? I've never been this large. I don't know how to begin. I'm too tired to exercise. I have too many hot flashes to exercise, all these things. So it felt impossible. Like, why start was really an emotion that I had.
Yeah. And with so many women being put on anti-hormonal drugs, their estrogen is being suppressed, which is making it more likely for them to gain weight, put on that belly fat. You are fighting a bit of an uphill battle here.
100%. Yeah, it really felt that way. And, I was really discouraged in a lot of ways. And for me, it took, it was a moment in time where I was researching weight loss, because as we do, and it was a researcher who said something along the lines of, the reason that we build belly fat and we build fat around our bodies during times of extreme chemical processes is because it's drawing the chemicals away from the vital organs. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it really reframed for me this idea of my body's not against me, it's for me.
Yeah.
And that mindset shift really hit home. And then I was able to see my body as opposed to this thing that did something to me, like it gained all this weight and I'm now in this bad place. Instead, I got to say, you know what, body, you're doing the very best you can with what you have. And thank you. And so therefore, I'm going to nourish you because you deserve it. I'm going to exercise you because you deserve it. Yeah. And that shift really, really made a huge difference for me.
It's like, it's power, right?
Yes.
That feels like power to me. And when you talk about, like, when we think about weight loss in general, like, what a loaded thing to Google, first of all, oh my God, or even discuss, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing, like, regardless of what anyone wants, what other people want, like, you're in control of your own body. So like, whatever you want is, you don't have to justify it. You can want something just because you want it. You got to justify it to me or anyone else, and you can change your mind at any second. But this idea of really like supporting your body, that's kind of a foreign concept for women sometimes.
Isn't it? Yes. Yeah,
Like,
we were all taught hate your body into submission.
Smaller, 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 right? In everything, right? Smaller, like body, smaller voices, smaller action. Oh, gross, right? No, like, you are an athlete after cancer. I look at women like they have endured, their bodies have performed. And in order to get them to continue to perform, we need to fuel it. That does not mean salads, only salads. Okay. That's not what that means. That doesn't mean coffee and nothing else until 2 p.m. That means like fueling your body for performance. Because if you want to get back even like to a job that's demanding mentally, not physically, we still need to fuel you. And so that's the whole approach. Even when it comes to weight loss after cancer, we need to fuel your weight loss. That does not mean less food. That means more food, more of the right foods.
Yes. I really love that mindset shift. I've been through a marathon, not I've been stagnant, but I've been through a marathon, and therefore, in order to keep going, I need to fuel it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So those are like the two main things that we can do to lower our risk of cancer recurrence. Now, I will always say that you need to have a plan. That's the first thing. You need to have a community of women around you who are not just surviving cancer, but they're thriving after cancer. So a lot of those Facebook groups that we join when we're first diagnosed, they might not be serving you anymore. And that is like, okay. They were there for you in a certain period of time, but maybe those women that are now entering their treatment and you're kind of mentoring them, they're not the best support for you anymore because you're ahead of that. Now you got to raise your standard, right? You're not just getting to the end of treatment, you're recovering. So now you have to find a new group of women who are not only, getting through cancer treatment, but they're crushing it on the other side. So like, what did you do in terms of that after your treatment, Christine? Because I know, like, for young survivors, especially, that's hard to find.
It is hard to find. Yes, absolutely. But luckily I knew this stuff. You're the sum of the people that you hang out with.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, what I really launched into was the same thing. Like I did leave those groups, and not because they weren't good groups. I agree with you, but because we were in different stages. They were in fight and flight, and I was trying to heal. So I moved away from that. And I joined groups of women that were uplifting one another. Now, it was difficult to find cancer survivors that were uplifting one another, which is precisely why I'm doing what I'm doing now. Just like you, I saw that there was really a lack in that way. But instead I joined other groups, and it was because I needed to be the sum of the people around me. I wanted to build back up. So I took transformational coaching programs. The Cancer Freedom Program, anywhere where I could find a connection with other women who were not just playing small, but instead saying, hey, I'm going to live large. Yeah. That's really, really what turned the tides for me. It's community. Yeah. Always community.
It's kind of amazing, actually, because it doesn't have to be a cancer support community, cancer recovery community, right? If you're done with that, fine. I think like there's a certain thread that runs through cancer survivors where you just kind of understand things without saying them necessarily.
Yes.
But the point is like, it's much easier to achieve something if you can see it happening in front of you, someone ahead of you, than just to imagine it out yourself. Because I think a lot of women, they don't realize that you don't have to settle for this idea of new normal after cancer. Like that is statement of complacency, really, like new normal. Because the women I work with, they're not in a new normal. They're better than they even were before cancer.
Right.
So
Right. Let your new normal be the powerful, most amplified version of you.
yeah,
And that's the new normal,
yeah,
right?
exactly. So
I was
it's
told
not,
that too.
yeah.
Yeah, I was told that too. Someone said to me, like, you're never gonna have what you used to have. And this was someone who was in survival, not thrival. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, really? Like, why did I fight so hard? Why did I try so hard if I'm never gonna have the life that I want again? Absolutely not what happened. I am different. I do have a new version of me, but that new version of me is far abounding any version that I ever thought that I could be. I'm in great health. I have lost all the weight, anymore. And so like with all of that, don't accept it. I agree with you. Don't accept it. Have your new normal be this amazing version of you.
Yeah. Like it's funny because one of my clients, she said she's on tamoxifen, breast cancer survivor. She was told, you'll never like lose the weight on tamoxifen. You'll have to be crazy. You'll have to be psychotic in your habits. Come on. Like that's being spoke from a clinician that doesn't know what they're talking about. That's harsh, but it's true. Like, it's just, that's not true. And how defeating to put that on someone, right? But
100%.
like, to your point, Christine, when you said you're changed after cancer, you know what? Like, you were going to change cancer or not. You better be changing cancer or not,
Right.
Were you going to be the same person like in your 30s as you were in your 20s? No.
Yeah.
God, I hope not.
Yeah. Exactly.
So like you, whether cancer or not, you best be evolving. So put cancer aside because like, we're constantly changing and for the better, right?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
that's really like the second piece is a community. And then I feel like the third piece to really recovering, really being free of this fear of recurrence is we've got to do some transformative mindset work. And Christine, that's your area of expertise. So what's the path that you take for women in terms of overcoming the fear of recurrence from a mindset perspective?
Right. So yes, so it's a structure that I have my students go through. And what it really is, I mean, there's no tried and true method that's going to say, take steps 1 through 6, you're going to come out the other side and you're no longer going to fear recurrence. But what you can instead do is empower yourself to live in the now. Learn how to live. And it's not just like, avoiding the future, but instead saying, this could be my future. This could not be my future. Both are fine. But I'm going to live the absolute most amplified version of who I am right now. I'm going to utilize this cancer as a catalyst in order to be and do and have all of these things that I always wanted to do, but I felt too small, back to that small piece. I didn't want to offend anybody, all of these sorts of things. So really the structure that I utilize is bringing you into your version of you. And this, and again, it's not a better version. It's not an advanced version. It's you, but turned up. And I find when that happens, this fear of recurrence sort of naturally falls away, as opposed to, let's think of it this way. If I said to you, Amy, don't think of a purple elephant,
Yeah, right.
right? All you're going to think about is this
Mhm,
damn purple elephant.
mhm,
And so since that's the case, focusing on no longer fearing recurrence is going to have an adverse effect.
mhm,
Instead, it's about bringing your focus into what's life now? How can I live fully? How can I be the full version and expression of myself? Because it could come back. It
mhm,
could. But if it were to, do you want to look back on your last 5, 10, 20, 50 years and say, like, I lived that up. I was everything and more of every single version of me that I've ever wanted to be, or I lived in fear, which,
mhm. You
right?
know, I always think of like there's a really like influential cancer survivor who lives in the community I live, and she is breast cancer survivor.
Mhm.
She passed away from breast cancer 45 years after her diagnosis.
Right.
45 years. She was like, look, I had breast cancer, yes, but I also got to have my babies, and I got to see my babies have babies.
Yeah,
And I like, she was just like, come on, right? Like, life's good.
life's good. Life's good.
Mhm. So
It
what do you
is.
do, Christine, for women who are like scan to scan, right? Because some of us will get scans every 3 months, every 6 months, every year, and they live their life scan to scan. What do
Mhm.
you say to women who are putting some habits in place like that?
Right. Okay, let's see. Scan to scan, living scan to scan. I would say some of the biggest things that I tend to advise, I guess, would be how can you utilize that as a goalpost for the next goal of yours? So, like, instead of saying I'm living scan to scan, like, as in, like, where am I? Am I still alive? Oh, thank goodness. Do I still have cancer? No, I don't yet. Oh, thank goodness. Instead, it's like, okay, these are goalposts. So 6 months from now, where do you want to be in your life? By your next
Mhm.
scan, what do you want to accomplish? Right. So instead of looking at it as like, you know, this big cancer thing, instead utilize it as an opportunity to say, I'm gonna set a couple of goals, and in 6 months when it's scan time, I'm gonna be able to look back at my last 6 months and say, what did I do in that time? So it's really just about shifting the scan itself to from a cancer scan to, this is my New Year's resolution, this is my next year, and how did my year go, that sort of thing.
And shouldn't we all be doing that, right? Like, I
Right.
got
Yeah.
goals for today, for this week, for this month, for this quarter, for the year. Like, we got goals coming out of our wazoo, right? Because otherwise, how if you don't have a plan for the future, right? It's like that. There's a quote from Alice in Wonderland that she asks the cat, the Cheshire cat. They come to a fork in the road, and she says, "Which direction should I go?" And he says, "Well, that depends on." Or which direction do I go? And he says, well, that depends on where you want to end up. And she says, well, I don't really care. And then he says, well, it doesn't really matter what direction you go then. So
Right.
like, if you don't know where you want to end up, then it doesn't matter what you're doing, really. And it's the same with your scans here.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. And yes, they're scary. And you get there and you think that everything's groovy, and you get there and you go, "Oh my gosh, I am scared." And that happens to me too. But the more that you can arm yourself with all of the tips and tricks that you can provide, all of the tips and tricks that I can provide, the smoother and easier those scans go. And they're
Mhm.
going to get easier and easier as time goes. And also another one that I really like to put my faith into is that we are on such a precipice right now in terms of cancer care.
Mhm.
In such a short period of time, we're not going to need to worry,
Mhm.
and that's like, and I really believe in our medical system. I never used to. I really saw that them as like the bad guys, and the naturopathic community as the good guys. And I don't see it that way anymore. I really believe that our medical system is doing the very best that they can, and they're on the precipice of all of these beautiful realizations and learnings, and we're getting all of this new technology all the time. So, trust in the medical system, and that it can and will be a place where we just go, hey, like, oh shoot, I got cancer, like, let's get this fixed up.
Mhm.
It's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
What a time to be alive, what a time to have cancer, if you will.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it's like an interesting point, right? Because a lot of what we talk about here isn't necessarily like we haven't talked about any of the like a lot of the bigger strategies that probably a lot of women use to reduce their risk of recurrence. Like everything you've done up to this point has reduced your risk. Like the surgery you had, yeah, that reduced your risk. The chemo you had, like most women have surgery, remove the cancerous tumor, they're left with no evidence of disease, right?
Right.
A lot of times that's the case. And so when we get chemo, you're getting chemo because there's this idea that there's microscopic disease. We can't see it. We don't know. But if your tumor had certain markers and you're at usually around greater than a 10% risk of having a recurrence, then you're going to get some sort of treatment like chemo, like radiation. Okay, so you've already done a lot of the hard work, the heavy lifting. Chemo and radiation, like that was tough. That was all to reduce your risk of recurrence. Okay, so we haven't talked anything about that. Check, you've done those things. Okay, and now we're talking about more lifestyle, food, exercise, that strategy. Okay, so in my mind, when I'm thinking about cancer care and cancer recovery, I'm using every strategy possible to lower your risk of recurrence. I'm using every strategy possible to get rid of your side effects, to make you feel great again. That doesn't mean you have to fall into a camp of like Western medical system or natural alternative medicine. You don't have to pick a side. I pick whatever works. What's ever been shown and proven, science backed. I'm an evidence-based clinician, science backed, whatever works, that's what I'm going to use. I don't really care what people's perception is of it or what oncologists' perception is of it. If it works, i.e. exercise, i.e. maintaining a healthy body weight, we're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Now, this segues nicely into what are some myths that survivors are going out there and doing and causing themselves all kinds of stress and havoc in their own minds and bodies, not enjoying their lives and families, that are shutting off happiness and a good mindset that people are practicing that are just outdated.
Yeah. I think like the biggest thing that I see women do is that they focus too much on the foods to avoid after cancer. Like if I were to really step back and look at the greater body of literature around how you lower your risk of cancer recurrence, I'm not going to talk a ton about foods to cut out.
Gotcha.
I'm talking more about foods to include. So, but you know what? Look, cancer is full of fear, right? Like cancer equals fear. So it's way easier for influencers or people online to say, don't eat sugar. Sugar fuels cancer. Your cancer will come back. Those are all fear statements. Instead of saying, if you eat more fiber, you'll lower your risk of cancer. If you eat more fruits and vegetables, you'll lower your risk of cancer. Those are power statements. Okay. Those don't trigger cancer survivors as much, right? But if you really wanted to do it in an evidence-based way, you would focus more on including more of the right foods and not cutting out the foods you love.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. And those statements, they have a place, like don't eat a ridiculous amount of sugar, don't eat, don't drink alcohol 8 times a day. But I mean, that's health for anybody, right? So like, let's let's change this narrative a little bit. I agree, from fear statements, and just say, how can I make myself healthy? And that's it. Let's just stop there. How can I fuel my body?
Yeah. I think that is a lot of the argument you'll see online, right? Is that we're facing a sugar epidemic, an obesity epidemic. Yeah. Yeah. But the women that come to me for support, the women that come to you for support, the women that are listening to this, they're like active in their health.
Yeah.
They're not going to the McDonald's drive-through twice a day.
No,
they're not drinking 2 liters of Coke every day. They're not smoking. So yes, you shouldn't eat a bunch of processed foods and sugar. Duh, right?
yeah,
The women we help, they already are cutting back, that they just want to have a piece of birthday cake on their birthday without fear, and
exactly.
that is not going to cause your cancer to come back.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I love hearing it from somebody with your background, with your expertise. Because I've always believed that too, from just a what seems correct to me is that if you can live a balanced, healthy lifestyle where you include love and connection and fun and birthday cake, and then you include exercise and eating right and being in nature and grounding and all of these things, which are truly just balance, then you are in body, mind, and spirit health.
Yeah.
And so many people, they launch into the body, but they forget the mind and the spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think without those three components, we are causing potentially inflammation and stress inside of our bodies because we're so scared to have connection. I can't go to that event because there might be sugar or alcohol or whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
What is that doing to your body in terms of connection, and missing that, in terms of your health?
Yeah, you got to think about what you wanted life to look like after cancer. Like when you were sitting in the chemo chair, when you were on the operating table, what did you hope life would look like after cancer? Was it avoiding parties because there might be alcohol? No, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was great big hugs. It was a bright, shining sun. It was feeling the wind go through your hair again. Those were the things that I was looking forward to. And so we can't lose sight of that.
No, and I feel that so deeply. That's such a beautiful visualization, and I can see it. And that imagery is just so true. When you were sitting on that table and you were so scared and you didn't know, what did you want your life to look like? Just live that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and it's hard to hold on to, right?
Yeah,
cancer survivors, they get parking tickets, they get mad at their spouse, right, for stupid things. Oh, but we got to hang on to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's always such a great reminder. And another reason why community is so important, especially around cancer survivors, which is precisely why we created courses in schools to do so, is that, we can remind each other of this important thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, it's just been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you.
Yeah. It's going to help so many women. So I hope we can reach far and wide.
Yeah, you got it. I'm sure we will.